Hello, dear students. Today we are going to dive into a really powerful story by Alphonse Daudet called The Last Lesson. It's set in the aftermath of a war and it captures this one single, absolutely gut wrenching moment of cultural loss and defiance. So, before we get into the details, I want you to just imagine something. What if tomorrow you were told you couldn't speak your own language anymore? That a huge piece of who you are was just gone overnight. Keep that feeling in your mind because that's the absolute heart of the story. Okay, so let's get a little context. You need to know the story to make sense. It all happens right after the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. France lost and two of its districts, Alsace and Lorraine, were passed over into the hands of Prussia. And here's the crucial part. An order came from Berlin. From now on, only German could be taught in schools. French was out, banned, and that's exactly where we jump into the story. We see the massive historical event unfold, but through the eyes of one little boy, a kid named Franz, who has no idea that his totally normal morning was about to be anything but. So Franz is like a lot of us have been, running late for school. He's terrified of his teacher, Mr. M. Hemmel, and he's especially scared because he was supposed to have learned a lesson on participles. And well, he hasn't. Not a word. It's just that classic stomach and knot school day dread. And you can really feel his internal struggle here. On one hand, the day is beautiful, it's warm, birds are singing, soldiers are drilling, but he has the strength to resist. And on the way to school, he passes the town hall. There he sees a crowd at the bulletin board. And for the past few years, all the bad news had come from the notice board. Lost battles, draft notices, and he wonders what could it be now. So when Franz finally gets to school, the first thing that hits him is the quiet. The usual morning chaos, all that noise, it's gone. And its place is this really weird, unsettling silence. I mean, usually the place is a madhouse. You can hear it from the streets. Desks slamming, kids shouting their lessons together. Franz had counted on the commotion to sneak in. But it's as quiet as a Sunday morning. And when he walks into the classroom, things get even weirder. First, M. Hemmel doesn't yell at him for being late. He actually becomes kind. Second, the teacher is all dressed up in his best Sunday clothes. Green coat, frilled shirts, stuff he only wore on special days. And third, and this is the real shocker, the back benches, which are always empty, are full of the village elders, the postmaster, the former mayor, all just sitting there, completely silent. Franz is just trying to process all this. When suddenly M. Hemmel says, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach you only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. This is your last French lesson." For Franz, those words are a thunderclap, and suddenly it all makes sense. The crowd at the bulletin board, that strange Sunday quiet at the school, his teachers, fancy clothes, and the villagers sitting in the back. They were all there to pay their respect, to honor the end of an era. And what happens next? Well, it stops being a regular grammar lesson. It turns into this incredibly deep lesson on what it means to have an identity, what regret feels like, and the importance of your own language. M. Hemmel says that everyone shares the blame for this. The students like Franz for always saying, I'll learn it tomorrow. The parents for wanting their kids to work on the farm for a little extra money instead of going to school, and he even blames himself, admitting he would sometimes send the kids to water his flowers. or just cancel class to go fishing? And then M. Hamel says something so powerful. He talks about how French is the most powerful language in the world, and he begs to them to hold on to it because he says when a people are enslaved, as long as they have their language, it's like they have the key to their own prison, their identity, it's their freedom. And you realize the weight of this day. The villagers in the back, they weren't just there for a lesson, they were there to think, they were just there to thank M. Hamel for his 40 years of faithful service and to show respect for a country that wasn't quite theirs anymore. And for our main character, Franz, the change is just complete. His school books, which felt so heavy and annoying just that morning, now seems like old friends he can't imagine leaving behind. And as M. Hamel teaches, for the first time ever, it all seems so simple, so clear. He realizes with a shock that he just never really paid attention before. So the lesson goes on, filled with this mix of passion and sadness, and it's all building to this one final, powerful, and totally silent act of defiance. And then it happens. The church clock starts to strike 12. The time is up. The lesson is officially over. And at that exact same moment, from right outside the window, they hear the trumpets of the Prussian soldiers coming back from their drills. It's this harsh, unavoidable sound of their new reality crashing in. Well, Hamel stands up. He looks pale, but somehow taller than Franz has ever seen him. He tries to say something, but he has just too choked up with emotion. So he turns to the blackboard, grabs a piece of chalk, and with every bit of strength he has, he writes two words: Vive la France. Long live France. He doesn't say anything. He can't actually. He just leans his head against the wall, and without a word, he just gestures with his hand to the students. School is dismissed. You may go. And just like that, with that silent, heartbreaking gesture, the last lesson comes to an end. Which brings us right back to that first question, the very first question, doesn't it? This story is such a powerful reminder of how connected our language is to who we are. And it leaves us with this big question to think about: is losing our language the same thing as losing your freedom? It's definitely something worth considering. Thank you.